G'day legends, there's so much going on in the world of MMA right now, but the biggest thing that we need to talk about is UFC 303. And I think the reason why smaller channels like myself or MMA independent YouTubers should be talking about this is because we are going to be getting different perspectives rather than the ones that are getting pushed out there by the UFC. Now, I know that the UFC has stayed radio silent about what is going on with UFC 303, but they are letting their own independent MMA media voices talk about it. One of them being Chael Sonnen. Chael Sonnen saying that the focus word for Conor McGregor's training camp for going into UFC 303 is the word focus, which means he has stopped all press because he is just zoning in on the fight and everything is perfectly fine. Don't worry about it at all. Everything's okay. That's from Chael Sonnen, who is definitely not spouting that on behalf of the UFC. So, what is actually going on? Why have we heard nothing from the UFC for almost 48 hours when it is coming to one of their highest grossing events for an arena ever? Dana White has been very open about how much money the ticket sales have already made, and 48 hours, people not even knowing whether or not the fight is going to happen, has led to a lot of rumors online. So first, let's look at the rumors, and then let's look at one of the reasons why we could be hearing nothing from the UFC, what I believe would be the most believable one. Number one rumor that's going around on Twitter is that the pay-per-view is no longer being advertised on ESPN. So what I can see when I go to the ESPN schedule for pay-per-views, 303 is still there. However, when you click on 3S3 at espn.com/schedules, it comes up with a 404 error page. That was pretty concerning. So what was the next thing that I did? Well, I went to the next event down on the list, and that also came up with a 404 error page. I went to UFC 304, and that also came up with a 404 error page. So perhaps this is just some bad timing for the ESPN website mixed in what is going on with UFC 303. Maybe the UFC have just asked ESPN to put a pause on everything to not single out this one event. But there is some rumors going out there that you can't even buy the pay-per-view anymore, but there seems to be issues with everything going on at ESPN right now, just adding to all the speculation and confusion for what is going to be happening at the end of June. The next theory is that the free fights that the UFC put up on YouTube when they start to promote a pay-per-view have been taken down or made private, right? The UFC usually put these free fights up there. We can all go up there and watch them. For people that don't have Fight Pass, I watch all of my fights on Fight Pass. So I never watch the free fights on YouTube. The reason I'm saying that is because they are not on YouTube. There are no free fights for UFC 303, which is kind of weird. But I never knew if they were there before, and I have no way of going back and checking if they were there before. So maybe if we can actually get around some of the speculation. Has anybody seen any free fights on YouTube for UFC 303? There should have been a fight where Michael Chandler had won a recent fight. They probably would have put up Michael Chandler versus Dan Hooker or Michael Chandler versus Tony Ferguson. And there should have been a couple of fights where Conor McGregor was winning some fights. Now, they would have been a very long time ago, but they should be in there. The last fact that we have is Conor McGregor put out his own statement on Twitter. I'm sure that we've all seen it by now, but what was interesting about that is he seemed to be talking in the collective. He said we couldn't put on the press conference. He said, tried our best. So it does seem to have been like a group effort of why the press conference couldn't happen. And then he went on to say that we'll see the sport's best comeback ever. But he didn't give a date and he didn't give a number. He just said we will still see Conor McGregor come back to the sport, but he didn't specify when, which is kind of weird. So that is the end of all the facts that we have for 303. Now we're getting into all the wild speculation from Conor McGregor having an injury, from Conor McGregor failing a drug test, from contract negotiations, all of this stuff, no matter what anybody says, until we actually get some news from ESPN. Everything else is just speculation. To me, the biggest issue with this fight is, if it was still going ahead 100%, they would have said something. To leave it for 48 hours with no news at all and allow the speculation to build across all of MMA Twitter, MMA YouTube, is very, very bad for the UFC. The UFC is a tightly wound machine. Its promotional control is so tight. It spends pretty much all of its money, rather than paying the fighters, on promoting the next event. And for them to lose control of the narrative like this is very, very uncharacteristic for such a big organization. It is very weird for them. which is why I do believe that there is something going on with this fight and that it may not be going ahead. I think if it was an injury, they would have told us that there was an injury and that they were working on a backup fight. There have been injuries before. They have told us that they are working on a backup for the event. It is not like someone being injured a couple of weeks out from a pay-per-view, especially the main event, is that unusual for the UFC. I do not understand why they would just allow the narratives to run wild if it was something as simple as just another injury. We've been here before. So to me, the biggest reason why the UFC hasn't told us what's going on with UFC 303 is because they don't know. And if they come up with a lie, they're going to have to backtrack on it. There is still something getting worked out about that fight card. And to me, that must be Conor McGregor's contract negotiation. He has spoken openly and loudly, particularly on Ariel Helwani's show recently, that Conor McGregor has 2 fights left on his contract, and he doesn't even know how the UFC are going to approach him with the kind of money that he wants because he is such a big superstar. Okay, so he has put out on Twitter that we are going to be having an event for UFC International Fight Week, built the hype and speculation for that. That fight then got made. Then they started selling tickets to that fight. Then they went ahead and organized a live press event in Ireland. So to Conor McGregor, he has pivoted himself where the UFC has already invested so much into this fight happening. And then Conor McGregor's backup is that he has gone and bought shares in BKFC, where if things don't work out with the UFC, he can go and put on his own fights, pay himself whatever the profit margin he wants is because he is part owner of the BKFC, and pick and choose his opponents. He also doesn't have to worry about drug testing anymore over at the BKFC. So he has got this whole backup plan by putting all of this stress on the UFC's shoulders. Then Dana White has flown over to Dublin to sit down and be like, right, we're going to finalize this contract. We've been in talks. Everything's going well. We want to give you a 7-fight deal for X amount of dollars with X amount of pay-per-view points. And Conor's gone, how about you give me this deal? Who knows? 1 fight at a time. This amount of pay-per-view points. This amount of money. Allow me to go box on the side. Dana has been like, hell no, we're not going to be doing that. If you're going to be fighting for us, you're only going to be fighting for us, and you're going to be fighting at this profit margin. This is where things start to get hairy. Conor might have big-balled Dana and gone, you need me, you've already invested all this money. Dana White's classic move is the UFC doesn't need anybody, we can roll on. Want me to prove it to you? I'll cancel the whole damn thing right now. UFC press conference cancelled, don't say anything until we sort this out. We are now at a stalemate in contract negotiations. That is what I think is the most likely scenario of what is going on. The UFC is trying to prove to Conor McGregor that they don't need him. They are scrambling to find replacements for UFC 303. Conor McGregor is trying to prove to the UFC that he doesn't need them and he has got a backup option for his career. The real problem, the real tricky side to that is, who knows how long Conor McGregor's sunset clause is. If it is a couple of years, he will be forced to sit out and wait. And he is already 35, 36 years old, something around there. He is prime for fighting, is quickly falling away. Although, as we have seen with Nate Diaz and Masvidal and Anderson Silva and Chael Sonnen and even Mike Tyson, when it comes to celebrity boxing, your expiry date is as long as your lifespan. In the case of Mike Tyson, he might even try and go even further than that. That guy is fighting through fucking heart attacks, man. The point is, Conor McGregor sitting out for another 2 years might not seem so bad if he is not taking his career in a professional direction and taking it more in an entertainment direction, which would be perfect down at the BKFC. This is what I think is going on right now as we are filming this, talking about this, speculating about this online. These two are at a clash. And at any moment, we could find out that everything is hunky-dory, nothing was wrong, there was just a couple of issues on the back end, everything was fine, it was just a couple of timing issues, don't worry about it guys, the fight is happening. Or we could find out that the entire event is fallen apart and we're going to be getting Michael Chandler versus Charles Oliveira as a main event, and Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev or Yuri Prohaska as a co-main event to save the entire card so they don't have to refund everybody's ticket prices, which are some of the highest ticket, I think the highest ticket prices the UFC has ever put on a show for. It's bloody crazy, mate. That is what we know and what I think is happening for UFC 303. Chael Sonnen, the MMA, Chael Sonnen, the UFC's mouthpiece of everything is fine, is absolute BS. Everything is not fine. The UFC media machine does not go dead silent 3 weeks out from a pay-per-view. That is just against all rules for the UFC. So Chael Sonnen talking out of his absolute ass, lying to us. So that's it for the video. Let me know down there in the comments. Do you think I'm way off here? Do you think it's just an injury? Put it down there. Why do you think there is a holdup for UFC 303? Do you think it's going to happen? Yes or no? Down there in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, I'm trying to get to 1,000 subs before the middle of July. So if you could help me out with that, that would be massive. Please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It's down there. Why did I point up there? Because I'm kind of dumb. And I'll be live streaming all of UFC Fight Night this weekend. So if you want to join me for that, that'll be damn good fun. Until then, I'll see you all in the next video.